Slowly come back and grab a chair. Okay, believe it or not, the next speaker and I live a few blocks away in Barcelona, but we had to come all the way to Berlin to meet. And he's a great person, full of energy. And I was trying to look him up when I prepared for the talk. And I don't even know where to start to explain his experience. He's a design director, a community leader, a teacher, a co-founder. He does so many things, it's crazy. But I'm really happy to welcome him today. And I think this talk is super relevant for anyone, any designer who's looking to get influence into important product decisions. And I think that's pretty much all of us. So thank you for coming, Kevin, all the way. And help me welcome on stage, Kevin Hawkins.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I like the smoke effects we have going on. All right. So I'm going to be talking today about getting your buy-in, which is really getting what you want, and that helps everyone. But first, if at any point you see sparkles on stage, it's probably the shoes. It's my little confidence boost, and it's what I wear whenever I want to command a stage without having a shaky voice. So if I talk too fast, let me know, but let's get started. For everyone online, the shoes are also for you. All right, so I like to add a lot of humor and inject a lot of audience interaction, hand raising. So feel free to laugh, shout, scream if you need to. Woo! There we go. Woo! Let's do that. Nice. Okay, great. So when I signed up to talk at Hatch, I was the global director of UX, so senior director reporting into the CPO. And then I had one of those fun things happen where I got laid off. And then I got a new job. So now I have the same position at a smaller company, and I'm doing the whole process of getting stakeholder buy-in all over again. So I've been putting a lot of these practices to use in the last couple of months because I don't have the history with these people that I work with now and my leaders. So these practices I've actually applied recently, and they're not just from the past. So before we go into all of those tips, who's this guy on stage? I have an American accent. My mom is from Liberia in West Africa. I live in Barcelona, Spain. I grew up in the Netherlands, and then my brother is Filipino. So I grew up all over the world, and oftentimes I'm like the first person in the room who looks like me, who has this accent, who has my background. And so kind of the skills I've learned by being the newbie also really help for trying to get stakeholder buy-in. Professionally, it's been about 17, 18 years. I've been working in UX product design. I spent a lot of time IC consulting, was a co-founder, which I was super happy about, sold a company, lost a company, went to big corporates, Booking.com, PwC, Glovo, which is owned by Delivery Hero, and then back down to super small companies, team of 1, 7, 10, 20, and currently at a company that has about 300 people. For context, my last design team was 104. So huge up and down changes, because I really like being hands-on and that 0 to 1, 1 to 2 impact. Logos of companies who used to pay me, and let's go. So, hashtag goals for today are helping you identify who is a proper stakeholder. Oftentimes, they are more people than we think they are. Showing a bit of how I've used techniques to get influence, to get support. So speaking for influence, speaking for convincing people, speaking for getting a paycheck, a budget approved, a salary, a head count. And then I will present some things in context of some examples that have actually been successful at companies I work at and other companies that have also done a great thing. If you were at the leadership atelier yesterday with Temi, some of these things will seem familiar in terms of tooling, but I'll give you some examples that are very specific to what's happening in today's day and age in terms of the layoffs, the huge budget cuts, the kind of things that are really making it hard to use some of the old tools that I've used maybe in the last 7 years. So first things first, I'm going to talk about people in a very direct way, maybe blame the Dutch background, but part of this is like stakeholders are humans. They have flaws, they have things that are great, they want value from you, they also want to, of course, speak the language that they're used to, so they're trying to get their boss's approval, their budgets, their goals, their OKRs hit, and so knowing what they want and what you want and seeing how they align is going to be a big part of which tools to use. And then, of course, show that you care. I think the passion always seems to work a lot more than simply the logic, but we'll talk about when to use which. So I'm going to walk around a little bit because I feel like I put shoes on for a reason. No? So it's all about what is the environment. Is it a big, dark, black room with one cute spotlight on a red dot, which I love? Is it going to be hostile? Is it going to be friendly? Is it a full room full of cool people? Is it people who are maybe questioning your authority or your judgment? The environment really impacts your ability to influence stakeholders. This is the environment that I've been managing stakeholders in the last several months, several years. Huge changes in tech. Around 300,000 people have been laid off in tech in the last 6 months. I was one of them. I also conducted one at the last company before I left that company. Specifically, this is the period of time where we're trying to get big design projects funded, and it's not a great time, right? I mean, exclusively, I think something like 70% of the layoffs targeted research more when I talked to my peers. There's a lot of targets on content's back, on data's back. Every team that had complaints, people said, well, we can just lose that team then, since you're not getting the improvement we wanted to get. And that's really hard for relationship building. So I'll keep it real brief on the sad part, and then we'll go right into the winnings. But this is the environment for food delivery. Working at Glovo, the biggest food player in Europe, owned by Delivery Hero, we were always looking at our competitors, DoorDash, Uber, and so there are lots of cuts that happened in the design leadership team, in the engineering, research, data teams. And then also the secret cuts, or we're going to be super harsh on you in our performance reviews, even though you don't know the bar has been raised, which also changes the way you have to represent achievements, milestones, and accomplishments to your stakeholders. So this kept happening, and I said, wait, this sounds very familiar. This reminds me of 2012, this reminds me of 2008, when they said things are dead, right? We said, oh, TV is dead, retail is dead, segmentation is dead. Who needs a CMO anymore? Brand loyalty is dead, consumers don't care who they shop with. Positioning is dead, people will change their opinions based on which ad they see. But these apocalyptic predictions will always be there, and yet the work continues. So this is the fork in the road we face today. And I said, well, let's turn this red, because the position is different. You need to come from a place that you have to understand the environment is budget cuts, is concern for the next quarter, is concern for a year projection. There's a lot more people doing trials now. They want to do 3 months or 2 months trial of a software. They're not doing these big annual commitments and giving it a shot. They're doing a lot of small budgets for projects, and then if you prove value quickly, you get a bigger budget. And this changes a lot of how you ask for things. So, now what? How many of you believe that UX is a team sport? A lot of hands. Anyone who doesn't agree that it's a team sport? No? Okay, cool. Or now you're shy about it. So the one name I forgot to put on here on purpose actually was designers. All the different teams believe, and in fact do, influence the user experience. Oftentimes, the designers are one of those teams, and instead, they should be the holders of the reins. Right? You should be involved in the creative process, but you should also be the one who's involved in confirming whether people's ambitions and their goals and their hopes and their dreams are actually feasible, viable, or produce desire from users. And so they should be in the middle of the process, and oftentimes we pitch stakeholder management as this thing where we're asking for respect, or we're asking for something as if we are not the ones who are going to ultimately be forced to execute. And I think we should change the way the narrative spins. So, thinking about the environment, let's talk about how you influence to get support for your initiatives, because oftentimes our initiatives overlap with the ambitions and the goals of our stakeholders. So, really quickly, feel free to shout out. What do you see when you see this? What does it make you feel? What do you think this is? Mid-journey. Someone said mid-journey. The AI talk before me is definitely influencing the room. Okay. Fabric. African. Patterns. Faces. Faces. Ah, yeah, I can see some faces in here. Okay, yeah. See, art is up for interpretation, right? If someone had the intention of showing you one thing and you hear 30 different answers, is it effective design? Or is it art? Now, how oftentimes do you feel like your stakeholders feel like this when you ask them for something? And they're like, oh, what are they asking for? Maybe it's faces, maybe it's fabric, maybe it's patterns, maybe it's design system, maybe it's a budget for a content analyst. They're like, what does that word mean together? What? They feel like they're looking at art oftentimes. They don't feel like they have a super clear understanding of why you're asking for something, what it impacts, how it's different than the other jargon term they just heard marketing teach them in the last presentation. So there are all these things that conflict and kind of confuse the message we're trying to share. Overall, we kind of agree that design should be a couple different things. It should be a co-creation between, let's say, design, research, engineering, and the business. So the PED, PDE, whatever you want to call it in your organization, the titling, but these three pillars oftentimes are considered the co-creation group. But it should be collaborative, right? It should be an influence on decision-making. It should be more fun and more fulfilling, both for the users and hopefully for us in the room, if the process is designed well. In addition, most innovative companies put leaders that are designers at the table. Now, this was a quote that I used to have in all my slides, and now I'm getting a weird feeling about this one, because all the cuts lately have been seeing this kind of take a step back. There used to be this design index, where you could see the companies that had big investments in design, the first companies to have CDOs, VPs of design, always had more money on the public stock market. And so a lot of those companies, ironically, have been taking the opposite direction lately. And it'll take us several years to see if their stock value or their retention rates or their conversion or churn numbers suddenly drop. But I do think it's a much more clear thing to say that when something is designed well, it works better. And so design flourishes when you tell a compelling story around human and business impact. And we oftentimes apply this to our work, but we don't apply this to the process of getting our work funded or approved. So how about we design the process of getting stakeholders to say yes? All right, time for examples. This beautiful face is my friend, Casey. Casey and I used to work together at Capital One. He's now a product designer over at Spotify. And Casey and I were talking about how people don't often understand which skills they already have or which skills they've honed when when it's time to actually talk to stakeholders. So, how many of you have heard of T-shaped, X-shaped, M-shaped, 10X designers, all these terms? Fun labels. So we said, let's just do a basic skill mapping. Let's see, how you feel, your personal assessment of each skill. And then let's see how your boss feels. And then let's compare that to the rest of the team, self-assessment and then also peer assessments. Are there any gaps on the team that you're trying to get funded? Are there any gaps on the team that is being told to execute or achieve a certain goal? And so I use this as the very first step for whenever I'm getting stakeholder buy-in, because usually I'm asking for funding of something or the willingness of the company to let me do something. And so if I say, hey, we've built an amazing team, we have 100 people, we have 4 people, we have 2 people, we have a massive gap that the people on the team themselves say they have, where no one here is really deep on visual design, or no one here is really great on animation or product marketing, or no one here is super great on content marketing for PLG growth. Do you understand that I need this thing because we lack it? Is it better to do that with the words or with this? And then imagine this as a big spider graph, and then 8 spider graphs on top of each other, and there'd be a big chunk missing for 2 or 3 key skills. So oftentimes we use techniques like this to show that, these are my type of people. All right, I have to get a couple GIFs in there. I'm a very animated person. So the second technique I use is okay, now you kind of understand we have some skills gaps. We have some people who don't have certain experience. We have some people who just, they love the process. They love what you're saying. They love the outcomes. But we can get that through another way, through a different team. And so now I have to go into what I call, conversational convincing mode. So let's get a beer or chat, or let's walk down the hallway and get a water cooler. Let's hop into a Zoom call, whatever your team is doing now. These digital hybrid promises. So it's now we have to convince you in 3 different ways. And how many of you know logos, pathos, ethos? Awesome, great. So now I can teach you. All right, so imagine the first thing. I'm going to call it heart. I renamed all of them because those 3 words in Latin are not things that stick in my brain very well. But you have heart, which is all the emotion, and this is pathos. So it's empathy, principles, values, inspiration. Do you understand who you're talking to? Do you understand their motivations? Do you understand when they are passionate or they care about? Can you use that to help them understand or bridge the gap between what they know now and what you're trying to get them to know so that they have the knowledge to say yes? Trying to get someone to say yes without context, without any background, is very hard. It's much easier if they, one, care about it. It's even more interesting if they are passionate about it. So can they find the correlation between the things that they are passionate about, their personal goals, their OKRs, their milestones, the legacy they want to have with the company, the legacy they want the company to have, and the thing you're asking for. Third would be head or logic, which is logos. So do you have anything that's tangible, that's hard? All my Dutch and German clients are like, yeah, but has anyone done it before, and has it worked, and how much money did it make? What is their NPS score? And I'm like, how do you think I'm going to find out their NPS score? What? We can do some really expensive research and find out. And then they're like, no. We'll just pay Gartner. And I'm like, that's not how that works, but that's very influential to some people. If you don't know, you pay Gartner to be reviewed by Gartner, and then Gartner charges people to get data that they were then paid to get. So no bias there at all. The logic part sometimes is a bit harder. You might have to go to different teams, different projects, use your peers, your allies. My favorite one is cred. So heart, head, and cred, a little bit easier than logos, pathos, ethos. It's a little bit more memorable, but cred is ethics. So how credible are you? Do you have a track record of success? Do you have the experience? Have you built personal interrelationships? Have you built trust? Do you have any past insights? I love when companies hire really great people from really great companies or from places where they've done really great work, and they tell them what to do. And you're like, wait. You put my logo on the screen when you said, oh, we have a new hire, we have a GPM or a senior director coming from Amazon, and we're going to tell them how to do everything way worse than they did it at Amazon, because why did we hire them? Why? It's like, did you hire them because they were at Amazon or because they were great? And if they're great, shouldn't they also have ideas you should listen to? We'll see about that. So, if those people are here, you have great people who have done work in the company, you have great new hires, you have good processes, but you are not hitting your goals, generally, you can do all these three things and still not get your influencers, your stakeholders, to be yes men. So you have to fight every single battle, which means you need to build different alliances. How many of you know the Hunger Games? Nice, okay. I keep changing all my slides based on which country I'm giving a talk in, and I was like, yeah, I think the Germans know Hunger Games. I think we're good. Yeah. I live in Spain now, so now I know a bunch of really specific Netflix shows that no one else has, and I'm like, can't use that one here. All right, so Hunger Games. All about the alliances. In this particular picture, these are I think they're called the legacies. So it's like they come from really famous families, and they're well known, and they work together like shit. Like they did not get anything done. They couldn't decide on things. They were always fighting each other. They stood in the middle of the forest, about to be attacked, and looked directly into a trap because they didn't know how to make decisions together. This is what I often feel like happens when you have sometimes an all-star who doesn't work well with their team, or you have a person who is given authority but doesn't have the respect of the team that they're being led. And oftentimes you have teams that are just formed, tiger teams, randomly. And you're like, great, you can put 5 people in a room together, but is there an alliance? Do they feel like they are a team? Are they working well together? Do their skills and the mapping of their skills fit? Do you have someone who is an expert at each thing required to make this a success? And then you can go to stakeholders with this extra data, this lack of information, this lack of funding, lack of skill, and the alliances really matter. So, you've done all the pre-work, your mapping, your alliances, your dependencies, your stakeholders, but now you need to prime your audience. They don't necessarily lack context anymore, but they need you to present things with clear correlations. So we all know customer centricity. We love it. We made people take classes for it, design thinking, D-School, blah, blah, blah. So whenever we say, oh, but this is really customer-centric, this company isn't customer-centric because they hated my idea, well, maybe they just don't understand which part of customer centricity this idea helps with. So maybe break it down a bit further. Speaking of Amazon, I had this wonderful, wonderful experience working at a company called bookclub.com. They are kind of a wild company. They spent $100K getting the domain name bookclub.com, which is fun. And then they said, what if we turned the books everyone gets recommended to read, but ultimately doesn't read, into a TV show? Would you watch a TV show for working backwards, or would you read the book working backwards? More people are going to watch the TV show version. So we said, all right, let's get Bill Carr and Colin Breyer, the actual authors of the book, and do a 4K, ultra-high-depth investigation into the storytelling of working backwards. What worked at Amazon? So these are the two almost longest-serving executives at Amazon from 1998, 1999 until now, and they made the model working backwards. And so the whole idea is kind of the backstory of what led to the PRFQ. How many of you know the PRFQ? Okay, so it's their version of a PRD, or a product requirements document, or PID, all the different names. And it's essentially, what is that big, flashy headline going to be if we do this correctly? So your company takes #1 spot at Hotel Tech Report, signing on clients like Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt for the best software in X industry, bringing in $1.4 billion of revenue, and is now acquiring XYZ. Then, what are the questions the press would ask at that press event, and what are the answers you hope to be able to give? Then, what are the visuals or the mock-ups that you would attach to that press release to actually show the work that led to that achievement and the work that's coming next? That is essentially the PRFQ. It is a micro-vision document for 1, 2, 3 years of work with actual milestones, achievements, metrics, outcomes, mock-ups, and hopefully a big, big North Star metric. Imagine having that for every project before you started. Imagine how easy stakeholder buy-in would be if we did that for ourselves. So it all starts with the customer experience. You have the big press release, you have the headlines, you have the outcomes, you have the milestones, you have the metrics, you have answers to those hard questions about deliverables, integration, timelines, budgets, and then, our favorite thing, you have visuals. You have prototypes, you have demo videos, you have whatever you need to drive a compelling story. Ironically, these 3 categories perfectly address heart, head, and cred. So you're purposely showing a visual for what you want to get done, you're showing tangible metrics for how to measure success for what you want to get done, and you're showing a big logical goal that ties to a company OKR, a company goal, or a competitor threat. Then you go with the exact same information into a meeting with leadership team, asking for the necessary resources, and then you build version 1, your MVP, or et cetera. Now, how many of you know the company Whole Foods? Okay, this is still working, nice, all right. So Whole Foods is a big grocery store chain. They kind of took a different approach, a lot more organic, a lot of tech enablement, and then Amazon bought them for 1.4, 1.8 billion. And believe it or not, the entire pitch to buy Whole Foods was on a 1.5-page PRFQ. That was how the meeting started. Big headline: Amazon, the best at getting things delivered worldwide, buys Whole Foods, the fastest farm-to-table organic grocer in North America. Is able to now get farm-to-table food to any food desert in the entire world within 24 hours for pharmaceuticals, vegetables, you name it. Now has the direct threat to go against Albert Heijn or Daikon's, which is the biggest grocery store chain in Europe. That's a very different headline than what you might think about if I was going to pitch an M&A deal of a grocery store to a tech company. Now, this is the way it went, and this is the way you can also take all your projects. So, real quick, the model is listen, define, invent, refine, test, and iterate. So the real questions that you have to answer, the template for the PRFQ goes like this. In stage 1, you listen. It's very similar to the Google Ventures design sprint. You know, what do I know about my audience? Whose voices might be missing or excluded? So is the right people in the room? You know, do I have the right resources? Do I have the right research? Do I have the market analysis? Do I know what's missing? Do I know the unknowns? Then define. What is the opportunity I'm trying to solve? Specifically, what data or what can you infer from anything that's a bit fuzzy that helps you form this conclusion? And then actually putting it and documenting it. Again, this is all before you actually do the work. Stage 3 is invent. What is the proposed solution, and why is this the right solution versus other options? This question, I feel like, would kill half of the projects I funded in the last 6 months. I feel like a lot of people come to design and they're like, we just have to do this thing, and I have the authority to make you do it. And I'm like, okay, well that's not how it's supposed to work. Like, why am I now doing discovery work that you skipped? Why am I now validating assumptions that you had that I already knew to be wrong when we did that 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 2 years ago? So why is this the best solution out of all the solutions possible? I crossed out customer for this one because it could apply for any type of product. What does the experience look like? So this is that visual part. You can do this using screenshots of a company that already did this, right? So market analysis, this is the best product in market. Airbnb, host passport, tells you all the fun facts about the person who's gonna be running the house you're gonna live in for the next week. That's it. No one else does this. Let's just copy and paste that and change it for our markets and for our business, but this is the visual. Or you can go and make your own visuals, of course. But imagine showing the experience as fast as possible, whether that be wireframing or rapid prototyping. Just get the visuals as early into the draft of this as possible. And then how would you explain the primary benefit to your customer? So is it a logical appeal? Is it an emotional appeal? Is it something that makes financial sense? Does it show happiness, satisfaction? What is it? So this is now the headline part. So what does success look like? What is the intended impact of the solution? What is possibly the unintended impact? This one we don't ask enough, especially at companies like Facebook. So we should think about, as a client, I can say this, I often come to them and I'm like, hey, this is fantastic work. We know that people get really sad if they only see like thirst traps on Instagram because that data's come out now. Are we gonna change this roadmap? And then they're like, well, that wasn't the goal. We have good intentions. And I'm like, cool, but what about the unintended outcomes? And does that make you change the roadmap? Does that make you abandon investments, contracts? Sometimes yes, like when Russia attacks Ukraine. Suddenly everyone is like, oh, we can't use certain products. How about you have that same mindset for everything else? What is the unintended look of this? How does it look? What are the optics? What are the politics? What are the unintended impacts? So a clearer experience makes it easier for users to act quickly. I steal this quote very quickly out of this, my favorite quote from Engel Steger. She has been a former director of Dropbox and Miro and a dozen companies. She is probably the #1 growth design director in Silicon Valley at this point. So like she goes to a place, she touches it, it becomes gold. It's kind of like Kari Saarinen, like goes at Airbnb, turns it to gold. Goes to Linear, turns it to gold. And so I kind of like investigating what exactly is their model for turning things into gold. And this is my favorite one. And then I'll kind of dig real quick into an example. How many of you know the pirate funnel? I think loosely we all know the funnel, but I love this particular phrasing for it because it's R. So awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and hopefully referral. So if we are realizing where we want to make impact, can you draw a direct correlation to the thing you're asking for and where in the funnel you expect to have the biggest results? And then find out who is the OKR leader or sub-OKR leader for that part of the funnel and make the appeal to them. Win the buy-in with the person who was most impacted by your decision and then get everyone else on board, if possible. Other times you can get everyone else on board and then you can make that person listen to committee. So hopefully you realize that this still works with silos. Silos can be pretty, but most of them are not. They're ineffective, they slow us down, and they are definitely not as cute as this one. Based on the way you have your company set up, you might realize certain techniques from this will actually work and some won't work. If your teams are centralized, like IBM or Intuit or Google, this might work in an exact copy and paste format. In the middle, at Atlassian, you might have to look at each team specifically to see who is the stakeholder here, what is their modus operandi, how do they prefer teams to make decisions, who is allowed to ideate or discover and who's not. And then Glovo, where I used to work, or at Apple, where most of the teams are decentralized, you have this battle probably 2 to 5 times a quarter because as the OKRs change, you rapidly need to try different techniques with different stakeholders. Now let's go into some quick success stories. You have TikTok. How many of you know TikTok? This is a joke, I mean, yeah. TikTok, right? TikTok is addictive, and this was maybe an unintended outcome of having a super high retention, high engagement product. But just visually, Even without using the product, I like the one on the left a little more. I have less things to do. I like full screen, immersive experiences. How many of you understand how big of a difference an engagement TikTok has over Instagram? Just generally. Numbers-wise, it's about 280%. When Instagram said our biggest thing we want people to do now is now post videos, how many of you post videos? Like, you didn't suddenly change the thing you came to the platform for because the company decided to, and I'm pretty sure they're not having the results they want. It's why Reels keeps getting bumped up. It's why they make you get forced notifications for Reels, forced notifications for your friend posted a Reel for the first time in a long time. And you're like, I don't care. Where is the setting, notifications, to turn off this notification only? It's not there for a reason. Generally, immersive experiences do perform better. And so depending on who designed the overall experience and how much effort and prioritization that team has in the company, you might be able to dictate the entire experience like TikTok did. The same model that I've talked about today is what Design.studio used when redesigning the entire British Airways app. It's now my favorite app in Europe for travel. I think Delta is the equivalent for the US, where you have everything. You have where the bathrooms are, you have where the restaurants are, you have how fast it takes to go from security to a bathroom, to your gate, back to a bathroom, because you have 2 kids, back to that gate, all in the app. And they took this super clunky experience of 9,000 pages and minimized it down to discover, book, manage. I don't know if that's the most clear thing, but in terms of jobs to be done and redoing IA, I've never seen card sorting directly implemented into a product faster than this, where the entire experience is, are you here to discover something new, book something, or are you managing an existing experience? And then Glovo, we did the same thing around a very different product. We said, we have a really great brand, but we have a really, really terrible accessibility issue. 18 languages, 30 countries. We technically have more food delivered per month than Uber Eats. No one knows who we are. The brand is very messy. No one asked for this, but I knew people were being fired, and I said to myself, we really should save money before they asked us to. So, have you ever seen Barcelona, where we live? Certain neighborhoods, especially the Eixample, half of the city, from the sky is a grid. It's a beautiful grid of octagons and fun shapes. It's a very good inspiration for a font or for letters. Then look at the brand. It's like kind of fun. Would you know it's Spanish? Would you know that they are 10 years old? Would you know that you can buy anything on here besides food? You can buy tires, you could buy TVs, you could buy iPhones, you could buy scooters, you could buy... The weirdest thing we have is like someone ordered 30,000 lug nuts for a tire, and we're like, we're going to send you 24,000 bike riders, but okay, we will get you your order. And like we went through the marketing, we went through the multiple languages and countries, and the brand doesn't hold. It's not McDonald's. And we have a sister company called Talabat, who works in Dubai, super strong brand. Baimin and Wuwa has 12% of all food in Asia goes through one company, and it's Wuwa. And so we said they have a super strong brand, so much so people buy the font on random objects. Just a cup or a fan or a mug, the t-shirts. They sell merch. How many of us wear merch from Uber? No, right? Like they just did something really great. So we did an analysis of all of our brands, and we said, if we do this correctly, we can be as famous or as recognizable as F1. How many of you right now can imagine the F1 logo? A few of you? It's a very distinct logo. It's a very distinct font. Very few brands have fonts that distinct, the brands that distinct. And so when we executed this, the brand value shot up, but also it's a $250,000 a year savings on licensing fees to monotype. And this prevented about 45 jobs from being cut in the team. So directly tie what you're asking for to an outcome, to an OKR, and to an emotional story, like being able to save jobs. And hopefully, you realize that all the counterparts who make UX have a bigger part to play besides the product, and you could directly tie it to activation or retention of customers or your employees. You can also build this in directly into the actual progression chart of your employees to make sure that they learn these skills And so I'll give a big shout out to Progression app, just because I love them. And then I will end there for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, that was fascinating, but I couldn't get my eyes off your shoes. I'm sorry, they are so amazing. I don't know if the people online can see it. Can you do a plan on his shoes? Oh my God, they're like shiny and gold and silver. Amazing.
That hurt, actually.
Also, I think you're the only designer who's allowed to have rounded corner slides. I don't know if you guys noticed, but perfect.
Yeah. So the background for the slides are going to be black. The black is an alpha channel.
This is secret. All right, let's go into the Q&A. We have 5 minutes. Let's start with the first one. How do you balance the needs and expectations of various stakeholders, especially when when their priorities might conflict?
I love this question. Fantastic. How many of us know personas? These are all very rhetorical questions, but it's the same thing. Like, I actually make personas for my VPs because they're the exact same thing as the personas you have for your products. They conflict, they have different intentions, they have different scopes, they heavily overlap in processes and the way they prioritize, but they have very different goals. And so I actually make a persona. Is this person argumentative? Does this person have big buy-in with their stakeholders, such as their VPs or the CEO or the board? I actually write down everything I can as an analysis of the stakeholder, and use it when I'm making decisions of who to go to and who to ask for what.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, next one. When do you know buy-in is not possible and move on? That's a good one. Ooh. I love the emoji.
Yeah, the emoji. So this should be like a little water drop of worry there. Sometimes the company is going through turbulent change, and at that point, I don't really try to ask for more than what is allowed. I think you know when that's happening. Massive destruction of orgs, reorgs, where there's new BUs being made, acquisitions, things like this. But oftentimes, it's more so I know when a certain person doesn't want to do something. They're either not engaged, they're going to leave the company soon, they don't want to ask for too much or be too ambitious, and you have to figure out who they go to for approval, but also who assigns things to them, and if you can figure out how that happens. So it's more of an investigation process. I don't ever say you just don't get buy-in at all and move on. I say you go to a different stakeholder. But it is sometimes an issue if your boss is the person who doesn't approve. And then you do move on and bring it back up.
Be aware of the situation. And yes, smart. Next one. What is the single most important thing a mid or senior level design manager can change in the mindset of a cost-concerned product owner?
Yes. This one's a bit nerdy. If you can find a competitor to your company that is either public or owned by a public company, and you take time to go through what they share with their stakeholders, you can almost find line by line a quarterly review of how things performed at that company, and actually show as an example of what it would be like to do that without having to spend the time of engineering to actually run an A/B test and then fail at doing that thing. That's one option. The second option is you can just secretly do a lot more user research and try to provide as much information on both qualitative and quantitative to show the interest to buy, add a very large margin of error, and say if we got even 30% of this interest to be actuality, we would be hitting 50% higher than your projections because people actually want this feature over that one. And if we don't do it now, we expect to get churn of 10% month over month. And ultimately, my idea is better to try, better to experiment with than to wait.
Thank you. We'll skip this. Oh, no, this one, yes. As a mid-senior designer, how can I negotiate top-down roadmaps?
Oh, it's my cringiest experience. This happens a lot. I mean, one day it happens on one team, another team it doesn't happen, and so it's very hard to know exactly. I always say that to negotiate top-down, you know who your stakeholders are very quickly. Whoever is the person giving the order, as long as it's not the CEO directly, this happens a lot for small companies with founders, I deal with this right now, you really need to figure out the logical part. So what is exactly the North Star metric? What is the lagging KR and the leading KR that they care about? Especially the leading one. We all get dealt with NPS a lot, and you're like, NPS is a 3-month rolling average trend that you can't use to measure what we did last week. Unless you're doing NPS at a 1% of all company user scale, you need about 3 to 6 months to see if NPS is a reflection of what my team did in one pod, in one cluster. So actually look for a very, very fast leading KR, like requests or visits or actions taken early in the funnel to actually negotiate roadmaps if you're looking for this kind of result.
Great tip. All right, let's go through one last one.
Yep.
I think we went through this one, so the next one. What is the opposite of a PRFQ to invalidate something leadership handed down to your team to work on?
That is a great one. I don't have a fancy document to suggest. What I do have a fancy document to suggest is your replacement for that idea. This is a common thing we know about, but obviously it's a lot more work to do something that no one asked for. Like the font, no one asked me to do that. I just did it, which is a massive effort, by the way. And then people realize that you have extra time, and then that's a different topic. But do a PRFQ of what you wish was handed to you. Now, let's say you get handed a project with tons of data and a huge scope and lots of research that supports it, but you feel like it's a lower priority. Flesh out the higher priority thing in your mind that no one has fleshed out yet. Maybe they do some pre-discovery before the quarter or for the OKR for the next year, but they don't really flesh it out, right? And they've already slotted it lower than the thing you're getting told to do. So go ahead and kind of pre-flesh it out, like pre-go through the PRFQ, look for who's winning at that thing now. And if you can tell, if you can find any results that show that winning on that category or that feature is actually a bigger reason for retention or for churn reduction or for acquisition than the thing you're being told to do, make the case for that thing in the same model as you would for an idea you had yourself. So this is more of a replacement for what you're asked to do versus purely pushing back.
Well, thanks again a lot, Kevin. We have a lot of other questions, but I think you'll be around today.
Yes.
So if you see him, go and talk to him.
Find the shoes.
Yes.
I'll be here.
All right, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you.
Thanks.